I would like to welcome everyone back to the Wilton Forum today to, for a open discussion on our conversations over the past 2 weeks regarding generative AI. I want to first begin, however, with a remembrance of one of our members. Bob Muse passed away. I just became aware of this a few days ago on September 21st. Bob was a regular member of our crew and someone I grew to very much admire, and I know that we'll all miss him. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that.
Thank you.
Um, over the past month, generative AI has actually been very much in the news. For example, AI and generative AI and Google and Nobel Prizes has gotten a lot of attention in the last few days. Jeff Hinton, formerly with Google, won a Nobel Prize in Physics, and the Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded to some folks with Google history who were able, using generative AI, to predict the structure of proteins. So it's gotten a lot of recent attention. And, it just reinforces my personal conviction that generative AI can be supremely useful in the way that has just been described and in the development of new materials, which is of great interest to me. But I'm also greatly concerned that it can be supremely abusive. And we're going to talk a little bit about all of that today. I hope you've all come prepared to discuss. And remember, we have a standing agreement here. We can disagree, but we're never going to be personally disagreeable. That's our operating principle with this forum. So I appreciate the fact that you're all online and ready to have a good conversation this morning. I'm going to turn the chair over to Marv Goldschmitt, who's going to lead us through at least the beginnings and into the morning here with some commentary. Marv, the floor is yours. Welcome back, Marv.
Okay. Let me get this off the screen, and I'm going to share something. Bear with me. It's always a challenge to do this. All right. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay. So, a little bit by a show of hands, I'm curious how many of you were at the presentation 4 weeks ago. It was.
I think
I
we're
can't
all.
actually. I can't see the gallery right now because the way my screen
Yeah, I
is.
think
So.
everyone here was.
Okay. So, what I want to talk about as a setup, the purpose for today is to have an open conversation. I think we have a unique opportunity. We're the forum is a self-selected group of interested people. A lot of it's technology oriented, and so there aren't too many situations where people really get to talk about something which is changing society dramatically. AI is one. I would say it's more than anything else. But I think today's purpose is not so much to teach, even though there is a little bit I'm going to give you as updates. It's really to see what everybody's thinking about this. This is dramatic. I mean, some people, and I'm among them, think this is the single most important advance or change or invention in the history of humanity. It's dramatic. You may not quite feel that way, and that's exactly the type of things we should talk about. What you think of as the benefits, the risks, the things that are confusing, concerns you have about, how it's being governed, whatever it might be. And also, feel free to, this is a confusing area. So expressing ignorance, to be honest, is fine. Every one of us has it. I mean, I'm probably as deeply involved with AI as anybody who's not a scientist. And I, 2 years ago, I was like a fisherman who's going out trying to figure out where the schools were. And last year I was, going out and swimming with all the wonderful fishes, and this year I'm trying to keep from drowning. The amount of information is just overwhelming. So, uh, there's an opportunity to raise your concerns, but ask questions and do it. But I think we have also another unique opportunity in that we do have the contrast of the world just 4 weeks ago and now. Um, because I think this is incredibly illustrative of how rapidly things are changing in AI. I'll make this as a direct statement. If what happened in the last 4 weeks, which I'll give you an outline of, had happened before the last presentation, I wouldn't have done the last presentation because things are different now. Um, and you will not only, get a list of it and we'll talk about it a little bit, you'll get an experience of it, how much things have changed. And that's important in two respects. One, it's hard to grasp, much less manage things to change very rapidly. The other thing is the curve of change in this, especially given its capability, is breathtaking. We have to change our own metrics of time. This is not changing at human time. This is changing at computer time, and it's changing very rapidly. And so staying up on it is very hard. I'll just make this general statement. Some of you know I was the executive who was responsible for shipping Lotus 123 40 years ago, 42 years ago. We were probably the first ones in the computer industry to experience what they call virality. Within months, I was in like Indianapolis and at a restaurant overhearing people talking about 123. That was amazing. But a year after we shipped 123, if you went and bought a copy, you were buying the same copy. You were buying the same functionality. We're 22 months into ChatGPT. Now, understand that those of us who've been in the industry, nobody expected ChatGPT. Nobody. That was like, what? We had not seen that. And it was a secret project and it was mind-blowing. We knew about GPT, we knew about, neural nets, and we knew about machine learning. All these things existed, but making it work that way, that was new. And so this is an overwhelming space. You know, as I was saying, a year or 22 months after it was shipped, where 123 was the same product a year later, this is 2 or 3, maybe 4 generations ahead of where ChatGPT was. And I think having that sense of change, of momentum, of almost, a waterfall is really important for people to have. And hopefully you'll get a sense of that just by looking what's new in the last 4 weeks. So I'll outline it. First thing that we did not have 4 weeks ago, and we have now, and anybody paying OpenAI $20, and I hate to say it, I'm going to recommend you do, a month for it, will have access to much of what I'm going to show you. Strawberry was code name. It was code name for a project at, that was actually the original code name was Project Q Star at OpenAI. It is the reason why Sam Altman got fired so famously last year for all of 3 days. Ilya Sutskever, it's an important name to know. Ilya Sutskever, who probably should have been in the Nobel running, was a student of Jeffrey Hinton, and the first hire that Elon Musk and Altman made when they created OpenAI. Brain bucket behind GPT, co-founder. A year ago, he went to the board. Remember, OpenAI was, still officially is, but won't be for very long, a nonprofit, which purpose was to create and validate safe AI. He went to the board and said, there's this project at the time called QStar that is very dangerous and shouldn't ship. And Sam's going to ship it. And that's why Sam got fired. That project Obviously Sam got fired, he got rehired. There were 13 co-founders at OpenAI at that time. There are two of them left. The changes in the last 12 months from a structural point of view and who's playing is dramatic. So anyway, Strawberry is now the name of Project Q Star, and then they gave it yet another name, O1, which is what you'll see if you're actually using it. O1 is meant by OpenAI to signal that this is a whole new category, and it is. Why is it a new category? Because it reasons. Think about that for a second. Right up to now, I hope I'm assuming that people may be familiar with Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. And thinking fast is what we tend to do all the time. It's called type 1 thinking. It's somewhat reactive thinking. Look, you don't want to stand there and analyze a saber-toothed tiger coming at you. You want to react and get your ass out of there. Excuse my French. So type 1 thinking is very important and got us to where we are. But type 2 thinking is more reflective, more contextual, more strategic, more planning, something that some of us do a little bit more than others. Until 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the neural nets, the LLMs, the transformers, there are lots of terms, they relate to each other. But all of those systems, when you're playing with a chatbot, whether it be ChatGPT or Pi or Llama or there are a raft of them, they were effectively doing type 1 thinking. And in fact, that was the source of hallucinations because it was reactive. It was also sort of a limit because you could talk to these things, they were quite impressive, but they weren't necessarily thinking for themselves. Type 2 thinking is reasoning. It reflects and it takes a long time to do it. And it comes up after you ask it a tough question, physics question, logic, philosophical. It really will engage with you. And it'll even propose things. There's a company in Japan, which is a spinoff of University of Oxford, called Sakana AI, and it's the AI scientist. It's based on type 2 reasoning. It will develop its own problems, theorems, and theories and experimental tests and actually run them. It's a scientist in a box, and it's real. They're not shipping yet, but Oxford's behind it. And Oxford's behind a lot of advances. I think of Oxford as being really now the hotbed of AI. So this idea that we have a reasoning computer is pretty dramatic. Think about that for a second. All the things everybody says about these bots, all they do is predict the next word. Well, there's some truth to that. This goes well beyond that. That wasn't available 4 weeks ago. So I'll just point that out. Then we had another thing just pop up. Again, these are both from OpenAI. And that was, again, something that's available to anybody paying their $20, a highly interactive form of ChatGPT 4.0, which is the standard prior to Strawberry. Strawberry is still embryonic in early stages. It's a remarkable thing. But GPT 4.0 is what most people use when they're using ChatGPT. And what they've given it for the paying customers, limited time. I think you get to use it like less than half an hour, 45 minutes a day, and it cuts you off because it's very expensive for them to run. An incredibly realistic conversational bot that you can talk to, you can interrupt, that has great inflection in voice. It's a fully engaging capability. That wasn't available 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago, we didn't have 2 Nobel Prizes given for AI. The first one was Geoffrey Hinton. Now, I don't know if many of you know Geoffrey Hinton, so I'll just give you his history. Geoffrey Hinton's called the godfather of AI. There are 2 other people, Benji and McCoon, who are also called the godfathers of AI. They all worked together, and they're all very active in the AI world today. But they go back 50 years. Hinton started working on the idea that he could emulate the brain with what he called neural nets. He didn't invent the term, but he really made it work, which is why he got the Nobel Prize. That you could emulate the brain in a computer, not some fantasy magic, but actually he had an idea from neurology of how the brain worked, and he was going to implement that. Um, Incredibly rejected by the computer industry, who didn't want statistic. They thought that the way you do artificial intelligence is you capture people's knowledge, you have a rules-based if this, then that, and you can then capture the knowledge of somebody like an emergency room doctor and share it with others on a box. But this idea that these things would learn on their own, that they would function like the brain, that was anathema to a lot of people in the 70s and 80s. Matter of fact, you got laughed out if you proposed a PhD thesis on that. But he doggedly stayed with it. And I think the University of Toronto was the only place he could find a home. He was British, and he's still there. And then he started a company where he started proving it in the early 2000s and sold it to Google for 44 million, and it became part of Google's technology. You'll see Google's name come up a lot because, to be totally honest, they're where all this stuff started, was at Google. All the major players, whether it's Sutskever or it's Suleiman, who's now head of AI at Microsoft, Hinton, Hassabis, who got the other Nobel Prize, every one of them is Google. And I actually give some credit to Sundar Pichai, because one of the reasons, and this is me speculating a little bit, but I know the industry, one of the reasons why these people left Google and started companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and Inflection was because they were at Google and Google wouldn't ship their stuff. I think Pichai saw how potentially dangerous this was, but his hand it got taken out of his hand on November 30th, 22, when ChatGPT came out, because now Google had to play. But all of this is, Google was really the hotbed. So if you look at these two Nobel Prizes, they're really important in a lot of ways. First of all, Hinton gets a Nobel Prize for physics, and he made no contribution to physics. He used some statistical methods from physics, but he himself didn't make a contribution to physics. He's not a physicist. Yet, because it was considered that important that they sort of twisted the category. There should be a category for AI. There should be a category for computer science. There isn't. Arguably, he should have gotten the fields, but he got a Nobel Prize for emulating the brain. Hassabis, Dennis Hassabis, he's the person with a number of other people behind AlphaFold. AlphaFold is not generative AI. It's a different type of neural network-based AI. And what it did, and I think I may have this number wrong, it created 200 million protein models. It takes a scientist a year to create one model. It created 200 million. So basically, I don't know whether this would be chemistry or it would be biology, but once again, Hassabis didn't do the work. He set the condition up and the AI did the work. So both of these Nobel Prizes were really to AI, not to the people. But you can't give it to it. So just think about that. The world has changed so much in 4 weeks. We're giving Nobel Prizes to AI functionality. AI is running on their own. As I said, it's pure. We're really in a virtual world because all of this is a virtual world. Then more things came out. There was a study. Now, from the last, when we did our presentation, when Paula, David, and I did our presentation back in 4 weeks ago today, we introduced something called UPA. UPA was an attempt to, we had a belief that most people weren't aware of AI and hadn't used a bot, and that awareness was critical. And once people were aware of it, they realized how important this is. And I guess in my mind, a little like in the Frankenstein movie, when the villagers all got up in arms with their torches and started storming, I guess part of me was hoping that there'd be a groundswell like that. And then the Federal Reserve, Kennedy School, and Vanderbilt came out with a study 2 weeks ago that they did in August, that 40%, 39.4% of all Americans, was done in America between the ages of 18 and 64, had already been using a chatbot. And more than a quarter of people were using it regularly at work. So this question of awareness, it's out there. And, there's a lot of pressure on people who are actually working, full days, in any cognitive place to be using it. So awareness, we sort of got what's called OBE, overtaken by events. All these things happened in the last 4 weeks, which, our goal with UPA to make the people aware of what's going on, that goes OBE. It was overtaken by events. That said, David's going to talk in a little bit, and Paula, about ideas we have for UPA version 2, a different slice. The same idea, something that somebody will use to help them navigate AI. But I'll let them talk about that in a bit. And then there was something else, which we're going to talk about. This is something that came out of Google again, and it's called Notebook LM. But I'm going to reserve that for a bit. So before we get to that, I have something I'd like you guys to listen to. I have to stop sharing or something else. Apologize. It's going to be 7 minutes long. And what it is, I'll just give you the heads up on it. I had a podcast. I'm just finding it on my computer. Bear with me. I had a podcast made out of relative to the last presentation we had. So you might find this an interesting summary, but I think you'll also just find it interesting in and of itself. So this is 7 minutes long. Just listen to it. Oh, and if I want to make sure you can hear it. Let me just check that I have a setting correctly. That is sort of important. Bear with me. No, I got to reshare it. There was a Marx Brothers movie once where Groucho was asked to do something, and he said, "No, this is simple enough for a 4-year-old. Go get me a 4-year-old." So, in this case, let me make sure that I'm sharing correctly. So that, yeah.
Well, I failed on this one last time. I tried to get the setting right and the video sound didn't play.
Well, I've got it now. I was talking my way through it. Okay, it's going to start right now. If anybody is not hearing it, raise your hand, but you should be able to hear it.
Welcome in, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely. And this one's a real mind bender, let me tell you.
Good.
We're diving into the world of AI.
AI, huh? Everyone's talking about it these days. But this isn't just your average AI chit-chat. We're going straight to the source, a recent Wilson Forum event.
Oh yeah, this forum was different. They weren't just focused on the techie stuff, but on making AI understandable for everyone.
Right, because usually when you hear AI, it's either like robots taking over the world or something super complicated you need a PhD to understand.
Totally. But this document breaks it down. It's like they're saying, okay, let's cut through the hype and see how AI is actually showing up in our lives.
More of that sci-fi robot jargon then.
Well, a little bit, but they make a really interesting comparison talking about AI like a fraud.
Can't see it.
You don't need to see it.
Well, we get
Well,
the
Stuff we don't really
idea.
see, but it's definitely affecting us.
Exactly. That's the back.
Let me just check. Can you hear it, everybody?
It broke up for a while.
Yeah,
Okay,
Didn't
but you
come
can
on
hear
and
me.
then you came in.
it's back
Okay.
on. It's back
All
on.
right, so, but you can hear it.
Door AI.
You can hear
But then there's the front door AI, the stuff that's impossible to ignore.
Like ChatGPT. Suddenly everyone's talking about AI writing poems and composing music.
And panicking about losing their jobs. But yeah, ChatGPT is a prime example of that front door AI. It's like someone cranked up the heat and now we're all like, whoa, this water's getting hot.
And AI is suddenly impossible to ignore. But before we jump into all that, I gotta ask, how did we even get here? From those clunky old computers to AI that can write a symphony?
It's a wild ride. The document actually starts way back with pioneers like Alan Turing.
Turing. Wasn't he like a code breaker or something?
Among other things. He basically helped invent the modern computer. But get this, back in the 1930s and 40s, he was already wondering if machines could think.
Think. Like actually think like us.
Yeah. He came up with this thing called the Turing test to see if a machine could fool a human into thinking it was another person.
So like those chatbots that try to convince you they're not robots.
Exactly, but this was revolutionary stuff back then. And then, in the 50s, you have Arthur Samuel, who coined the term machine learning.
Machine learning. Is that like teaching a computer to learn new tricks?
Exactly. He created this checkers playing program that learned from its mistakes. Pretty mind-blowing stuff for the time, right?
While we were all worried about the Cold War, these guys were basically inventing the future. So we've got AI simmering in the background, and then, bam, it explodes onto the scene.
And that's where things get really interesting because not everyone really understands what's going on.
Yeah, there's so much hype, so much fear. It's like, is AI going to save us or enslave us?
And that's what this document is trying to address. How do we bridge that knowledge gap and empower people to understand AI for what it is, not just the hype?
It's like we need an AI translator, something to make it all make sense.
Well, funny enough, that's exactly what the Wilson Forum folks propose. They call it UPA.
UPA, huh? Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more about this UPA thing. UPA. It sounds kind of mysterious, doesn't it? Like some secret AI project.
Yeah, it's a bit like that, but not in a sinister way. It's more like, well, the document describes UPA as an AI agent.
An AI agent. Okay, so not a person, but...
Exactly. It's like a digital guide. But here's the really cool part. It's designed to introduce anyone and everyone to the world of AI.
Anyone.
Yeah.
So you're telling me you don't need to be a computer whiz to understand this?
Not at all. The name itself is kind of a clue. Upa in Sanskrit. It means the one next to you.
The one next to you. So like AI for everyone, accessible to anyone.
Exactly. Imagine having like a friendly AI buddy right there to explain all this stuff, to help you actually experience AI firsthand.
Instead of just reading about it in some tech journal.
Right, because UPA isn't about lectures and jargon, it's about giving you a taste of what AI can actually do. Oh,
So it's like interactive.
totally. Like imagine you're having a conversation with UPA and it's walking you through, say, how AI is used in music recommendations using examples from your own life.
Okay, now that's pretty cool. Instead of just telling me how it works, it's like, hey, remember that song you listened to on repeat last week?
Exactly. It's making it real, relatable. And the document really emphasizes that this is just the beginning for UPA, the tip of the iceberg.
So UPA is like an AI translator, taking this complex stuff and making it understandable. But how does it actually work?
Well, they don't get too technical in the document, but they do mention this idea of explainable AI.
Explainable AI. So like AI that can explain itself.
In a way, it's about making the decision-making processes of AI transparent so we can understand how it's coming to its conclusions.
So we're not just trusting this black box to make decisions for us. We can actually peek under the hood.
Precisely. And remember how they're looking for feedback on UPA? That's part of it. Figuring out how to make AI more transparent and trustworthy?
So what kind of feedback are they looking for? What could UPA do that would be even more helpful?
Well, imagine being able to say, hey, UPA, show me how AI is being used in healthcare. And it pulls up interactive simulations, real-world examples, stuff like that.
So you're not just reading about it, you're actually seeing it in action.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, I'm sold on UPA. But this document isn't all sunshine and roses about AI, is it? it mentions some of the potential downsides too, right?
You're right, it does. They don't shy away from the big questions like, what happens if AI gets too powerful? Can we control it? And that's where this idea of the control fallacy comes in.
The control fallacy. Uh-oh, that sounds ominous. The control fallacy, huh? So are we talking like Terminator scenarios here? Should we be digging bunkers?
Not quite. But it does get at this fear we have of, AI becoming this unstoppable force. The document basically says that trying to control AI, whether through laws or tech, it's just not going to work.
Really? Why not? I mean, we make laws for everything else.
It's different with AI. Imagine you try to write a law to regulate it, but AI is constantly evolving, changing faster than we can keep up. It's like trying to nail jelly to a wall.
Okay, yeah, that's not going to be easy. So are you saying any attempt to control AI is just, like, pointless?
It's more that, well, the document argues that instead of trying to control it, we should be focusing on understanding.
Understand. Okay, but how does that help if we can't even keep up with it, let alone control it?
Because the more people understand AI, the better equipped we are to guide its development, It's about
Yeah.
shaping it, not controlling it.
So it's like knowledge is power when it comes to AI.
Exactly. It's about empowering people, not just with knowledge, but with the ability to form their own opinions about AI.
This brings us back to YUPA. It's like,
Oh.
YUPA is that bridge, right?
Yeah.
It helps us understand AI so we can be a part of the conversation.
Precisely. It's about democratizing AI, making it accessible to everyone. Because the future of AI, it's not predetermined. We're all shaping it with every choice we make.
That's actually kind of empowering. We're not just along for the ride, we're actually in the driver's seat, in a way.
Exactly. And that's what this document really highlights, the importance of being informed, engaged, and ready to participate in shaping the future of AI.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. It's been a fascinating deep dive into the world of AI.
Absolutely. We covered a lot of ground, but hopefully it sparked some curiosity, some new ways of thinking about this incredible technology.
Definitely. So to our listeners, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and remember, the future of AI is in our hands. Until next time, keep those minds curious, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.
Okay, so obviously that was a podcast created from the presentation that we did. What do you think of it? How do you think it got made?
I thought it was a pretty impressive summary.
Are you saying that that was done by AI?
Well, I was waiting for somebody to ask. Yep.
Well, you just implied that. Well,
Yeah.
how did you think that was done?
All I did was upload the PDF of the slideshow I did 4 weeks ago. And 4 minutes later, without any prompting, notebooklm.google sent that back.
Wow.
It analyzed, it added things, it hallucinated a little bit, to be honest, but it had metaphors like nailing jelly to a wall.
Marv, what did you ask to do?
That was not available 4 weeks ago. That's
Is-
available
That's a
to
question.
everybody with a Gmail account. Type in notebooklm.google and you can do it too. Sorry.
Avi?
How did you establish the level of that? It seemed that, if anything, it was not as sophisticated as it might have been. Did you tell it to give instructions that talk to somebody who's a sophomore in high school or people untrained in technology? What instructions did you give?
Zero. I gave it no prompts. I simply uploaded it. It did everything on its own. I would say that the level, the voices, that was predetermined by Google. This is brand new. I have no doubt in the future, exactly what you're talking about will be selectable. So you want 3 different people talking, you want 2 males, you want 2 females, you want a dog barking in the background. I have no doubt that'll all be available. You want to talk at a PhD level, you want to talk at a 6th grade level. That's all achievable. It's not in it right now.
So
Tom.
I do have one quick question. I think you just answered it. Those voices were actually generated by the software. So that wasn't a transcript that somebody read. That was in fact fully developed by the software.
And that was done within 4 minutes. everything you experienced was AI. Everything. From a simple uploading of the PDF of the presentation I did 2 weeks ago.
Too bad I was gonna ask her out.
Well, I will
which-
interject. Speech synthesis has been available for a long time, and AI voices. But well, this is pretty impressive to create such an engaging dialogue.
Yeah, on all levels.
Yeah,
And this is what they're willing to show us.
Walter.
Yeah, so Mark, did you, at the command you gave it, did you say, create a podcast, based on this PDF? Is that the command that you gave Notebook LM?
I couldn't quite get, you're breaking up a little bit. It's just a little hard
Sorry.
to hear you.
Yeah. So what command did you give LM Notebook? What-
Zero.
No, you must have
Zero.
said, create a podcast.
No, I'm talking about not a word. All it is you load it. It's available. Yeah, there are a couple of things you could select. So I selected podcast and I uploaded it. Did nothing. I
I
didn't
think
say,
Walter was asking, why did it make a podcast then?
because that's what this does. There's an option to select that, to do that. You can
Okay.
use Notebook for other type of organization.
So you
But-
pushed the button that said make podcast.
Yeah,
It makes podcasts.
that's
Oh,
right.
And they're all,
That was
right
the-
now, they're all deep dive. That's the brand, and it's all those two voices.
So the
But that's
one,
pretty much-
the one instruction you gave was simply to create a podcast. Right?
I never even said that. I simply.
Well, you
know,
checked that button. You could have, there were other
Yes,
options. but yeah,
that was all I did.
yeah.
And dragged and
How-
dropped the file
Yeah.
over into the box.
Gotcha.
That was it.
How long was the video that you gave it? How many
didn't-
minutes?
It was a PDF of the present. It's exactly what, if you saw the presentation 4 weeks ago, it was that presentation. Unaltered.
It was a transcript.
It was a slideshow. It was a PowerPoint slideshow turned into a PDF.
Wow. By the way,
Well,
there's
well,
That was the
well,
right word.
Would
No,
it have
when
got more
Marv sent this to me, or shortly after it was produced, I started listening to it and I thought, how do these people find out about the Wilson Forum, you know? And then all of a sudden I began to realize this has got to be a AI generated, and it's absolutely stunning to me.
How many of you by hand, just curious, how many of you by hand, and it would be great if the people who are on mute, visual mute, go off user mute, because this is about a discussion. So seeing people is a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm
anyway,
curious
that's
by
what I
hand,
wanted to
how
say.
many of you thought those were two real people? At least, yeah. Welcome to the Turing test. We just passed the Turing test.
John, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah, John. Yeah.
I just raised my hand in answer to his question. That's all. I didn't want
Oh,
to
I
say.
see. I see. All right,
Although
sorry.
I will ask the question, what is the Turing test? It was just that a computer could simulate a person to where we would think it was a person. So that's past the.
Well,
Turing test.
yeah, but the history of it is that Alan Turing, who's, if Jeffrey Hinton's the godfather of AI, Turing is the godfather of computing. You may remember the Imitation Game. I think that was called, the name of it. It was a movie. It was about Alan Turing breaking the Enigma code during World War II.
Yeah.
He was the guy in 1936. He published a paper which basically said computers can think the way that humans did. That's before computers existed. We didn't have our first computer until the early 40s.
Very
and-
sad what the British did to him.
Yes, he
If he had lived long, or who knows?
and if you don't know the story, it's worth knowing. He was gay, and he was saved. I mean, a lot of people think because he broke the Enigma code, he actually won World War II for the Allies. But he was hounded in Britain. He was He was given the option of going to jail or being chemically castrated, and he committed suicide instead.
Yeah.
But in 1950, he proposed the Turing test, very formally. The Turing test, and it started being run, but it got exactly to the point that was made. At what point will a computer be indistinguishable from a human by a human? And they ran it in such a way, obviously, then it would be people behind a curtain, and one of them would be a computer, and somebody would be reading off maybe what a computer printed out, while somebody else would be an expert. And the trick was for the panel of experts who were asking questions to figure out which one was which. And for, decades, it was pretty obvious the AI was not an AI. That started changing around 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And here we are. This is, everybody argues about AGI, artificial general intelligence, which, by the way, is distinguished from a GAI, which is general artificial intelligence. General artificial intelligence is what we definitely have now, meaning an artificial intelligence that can deal with anything. Well, if you talk to a chat GPT, it'll give you a sonnet, or it'll give you, how to throw a curveball. It'll give you everything. So that's general artificial intelligence. Artificial general intelligence, AGI, is basically where it can do anything a human does. And there was a bet between Mitch Kapor, my friend and my boss at Lotus, and Ray Kurzweil, that was established in 2002. That doesn't mature till 2029. Kurzweil bet that by 2029, we would have AGI, artificial general intelligence, where basically anything that a human can do can be done by a computer. Now we're arguing, are we there yet? Or are we a couple of years away? In some ways, look at AlphaFold. AlphaFold is way beyond what a human can do. That's why it could create 200 million models for proteins, unique models, all of which were executable, when a human would take a year to produce one. And I'm talking a top scientist.
Let me ask a question. Let me ask a question.
Sure.
You fed not transcript, but the information from our meeting, and you produced a podcast. You knew the information was authentic. You were part of it. Suppose someone fed information that was false. Suppose someone said, "Well, this guy Latanison, he's a wife beater, beats up kids, kicks dogs. He's a really nasty man," and you asked them to create a podcast from that. How it would do it, right? How would the
unless they have some built-in guidelines?
But how would the public distinguish between something that's authentic and something that's a fabrication?
That's
Welcome to
where my mind, that's where my mind was going. Probably in our discussion, we should start talking about guardrails, since I was flabbergasted even while listening to the forum, Cambridge forum, and I guess I admit I haven't thought through this as carefully. I know some like Hinton have voiced very serious concerns, but I'm a technologist, and technologists are biased towards pushing the technology forward, and they don't think about the repercussions. But here we have a deep fake opportunity that could go right into our election campaign, where you can make up interviews and
Well, you raise Hinton. So I had something queued up, and we're going to listen. This, I just got to get it so I can actually see it on my screen so I can click on it.
Yeah.
This is Hinton being interviewed by NPR's The World 2 days ago.
And before you start, I just want to mention that in the chat side, we could have discussion over it while this is playing, so we're not talking over it. We're already in the chat side, so if you just click chat, you'll see that there's already a discussion going on there.
So this is about a 7-8 minute interview.
Okay.
I think it's incredibly revealing and gets to the point. I was waiting for somebody to bring up Hinton to play this. Let me make sure I'm sharing the sound correctly. These are always challenging. Yep, I am. Okay.
Flabbergasted. I didn't know I was nominated for it, and I was
Start from the beginning.
Committee.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I need to start from the beginning. I didn't. My bad. Okay.
Story from the world. British-Canadian scientist Geoffrey Hinton summed up his reaction to a call from the Nobel Committee early this morning in one word.
Flabbergasted. I didn't know I was nominated for it, and I was extremely surprised. It's a bit odd that it's in physics.
Odd because though he won the Nobel Prize in Physics, Hinton is a computer scientist and a giant in the world of artificial intelligence. His work decades ago helped make new technology like ChatGPT possible. More recently, Hinton made headlines last year when he left his job at Google to warn about the dangers of AI. When we spoke this morning, not long after his Nobel Prize was announced, I asked Hinton about the origins of his AI breakthroughs.
Actually, the idea of imitating the brain's neural networks and learning the strengths of connections between neurons, that goes back a long way to the 1950s. Both Turing and von Neumann thought that was the right way to do AI, but they both died young. I think the history of the field would have been very different if they'd lived. But then for about 50 years, AI got taken over by people who believed that it had to be symbolic expressions processed using symbolic rules. So they based the ideas of AI on logic. That was called symbolic AI. And it never worked very well. But people were totally convinced that was the right way to go.
Is there something that people tend to critically misunderstand about AI, what it is, how it works, that you find yourself constantly correcting the record on?
Yes, a lot of people, particularly linguists, claim that these big chatbots don't actually understand what they're saying. And I think they're quite wrong. I think they do actually understand what they're saying. They have real understanding. And if you ask where the large chatbots came from, the early models back in the 1980s weren't designed for technological reasons. They were designed as models of how people understand the meanings of words. And so the best model we have of how people understand the meanings of words, how they learn them, is these AI chatbots. They're very like us in that sense.
You have been outspoken about your concerns regarding AI. Do you consider this an award for the scientific advancements that you made possible, or for some of that outspokenness, your conscientious objection to how it might be used?
I don't actually know. I hope that my concern for the social implications of AI was a contributing factor, but I don't know.
I'd like to drill down a little bit more on what does it look like for AI to take over from the point of view of someone who knows it and isn't just theorizing. You know, what does that actually look like day to day?
It could just be that people become irrelevant, that AI is really making all the decisions. So the kind of best version of that would be, imagine a big company where the CEO is not very bright. Maybe he's the son of the previous CEO. And has a very smart assistant, probably female, who's much smarter than him. The CEO is still in charge, but actually, when he asks for something to be done, he doesn't understand how it all works. His assistant makes everything work and tries to make things happen that he would like to happen, but he really doesn't have a clue what's going on. It could be like that.
And so the AI assistant in this case scenario is akin to the real-life assistant who's actually running the show?
Yes, it is.
And what about the worst case?
The worst case would be if the AI has its own interests and decides it doesn't care about people and wants to control itself.
How does it feel to win the biggest prize in physics today, but have some regret being attributed to you in all the coverage of this?
Well, there's sort of two kinds of regret. There's guilty regret, where you did something you know you shouldn't have done and you wish you hadn't. And I don't have any of that. I think in the same circumstances, have made the same decisions again. But then there's the kind of regret where you did something that seemed reasonable at the time, but it might turn out to have had bad consequences. And we still don't know, but it's possible that if AI gets more intelligent than us, it will take over from people. and I'd regret that.
Can you tell me more about what exactly those concerns look like if AI takes over from people, as you say?
Well, we're so used to being the most intelligent thing around, the most intelligent species around, that we don't really have much comprehension of what it would be like not to be the most intelligent species around. And there are very few examples of less intelligent things controlling more intelligent things. Generally, the more intelligent things are in control. There are some examples, like babies control mothers quite effectively, but evolution put a lot of work into that.
So what's the solution at this point? I mean, the underpinnings of this work has now been recognized by a Nobel. Are you calling for a halt to further AI development, a slowdown, responsible development?
No, I'm not calling for a halt or a slowdown because I think those things are completely infeasible. AI is going to have so many wonderful consequences, particularly in areas like healthcare, that there's no hope of slowing it down. It's very powerful and it's going to do amazing things and increase productivity a lot. What we need to do urgently is figure out how we're going to deal with all the possible bad side effects of it. For that, we need smart young researchers working on it, and we need the large companies to provide them resources. And for that to happen, we need governments to tell the large companies they have to spend a certain fraction of their resources on safety research rather than just trying to make profits.
What's your favorite use of AI in your own life right now?
Slightly embarrassing, but probably the best experience I had was using GPT-4 to help me learn to use Excel. I'd always put off learning to use Excel, and eventually I had to learn to use it. And GPT-4 was extremely helpful in very patiently telling me how to use it.
That is a lovely use for AI. It's funny that someone who developed the underpinnings of machine learning and artificial intelligence then had a machine teach him how to use Excel. I will leave it there. Congratulations on your achievement, and thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
British-Canadian scientist Geoffrey Hinton is the winner of this year's Nobel Prize for Physics.
That's a wonderful conversation. I applaud his candor in saying use the machine to teach him how to use Excel. That's wonderful.
So I'm going to ask everybody to do something. Go into type 2 thinking for yourself, maybe quietly for a moment, and start thinking about the implications of this. And I'll just give you a couple dimensions. That it clearly can do things we can't do. That people like Hinton are beginning to believe that it has autonomy, motive. I don't want to use the word consciousness because that's way too philosophical and mystical. We could then get into the issues of what our consciousness are. So I'm not going to go there, but it behaves. And it's dramatically changing with this year alone, just in generative AI. The estimate is the investment in the United States is going to be over $110 billion. That money is being spent to advance things quickly. We've seen what happened in the last 4 weeks. I have no idea what's going to happen in the next 4 weeks. We'll make one other comment when it comes to the issue of control and legislative changes and group. I stated last time, and they talked about it in the podcast that was created about the fallacy of control. Last week, actually, a week and a half ago, Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill called California SB 1047. It was the most aggressive and advanced idea for how to make the companies producing the foundational models responsible for being open about how they train the models and responsible for testing them and responsible for damage created by them. It got defeated. There are lots of little introductions and efforts in regulation, but Gavin Newsom's answer was very simple. Well, it's twofold. One, he said, it's changing too quickly to regulate it, which I agree with. And the other was it would put the US at a disadvantage because it would affect any country, any company doing business in California, just like automobile manufacturers were affected by changes in California's automobile requirements. And he felt that would be damaging the US. So we have a competitive world with a technology that people don't fully understand how it works, and actually partially understand how it works. That notebook is a good example. And that that we're going to have to live with changes happening daily. So I'm going to ask you to put your type 2 thinking on for a moment.
Yeah.
And create a conversation among you guys about the implications of this, your concerns, where it might go, what it might mean for you, your kids, everybody else, people entering the workforce at a level that, you know, is more repetitive, like a customer support person that maybe won't have that first rung on the ladder. Think about it broadly, and I'd like to see if we can have a discussion in that
All right,
context.
let's do that. I want to turn to Albert, who has his hand up, but then I'd like to get David and Paula to just make some comments and give us some feedback from their perspective as well.
And
Albert,
right, and what, just as an introduction, I was going to do that.
okay.
David and Paula have been looking at how UPA can be moved ahead to help people adapt, and they'll talk a little about that.
Very good. Albert.
Okay, thanks. My first question is, where does Marvin Minsky with his thinking machine fit in all of that?
He fits, but he's not as central as he thinks he is.
But
In
was
fact,
it symbolic? Was his work
it was
symbolic?
yeah, he was a symbolic, rules-based thinker, and in fact, Ray Kurzweil was a student of his back in the 60s. Ray was in his teens. He was genius. The thing about Ray Kurzweil, you may know of him, he's head of futurism for Google. He's the inventor of the synthesizer. He's the inventor, and this was AI, of text-to-speech in the 70s for Stevie Wonder. Minsky and him were at odds. Every prediction that Kurzweil made turned out to be right. Every prediction Minsky made in that context turned out to be wrong.
Just for reference, Marvin Minsky was a former colleague of mine at MIT and credited with being the founder of the MIT AI lab many years back. But let's go to Tom.
Now, wait, I'm not done. Okay.
You had the second question. Okay, go ahead.
Just curious, the kind of question you asked, or rather Hinton asked about what can AI has its own plan different from what human wants, etc. Has anyone tried to query this new machine and ask that to the machine?
I didn't quite get that. I just last part of your question, I just didn't quite get it.
You know, Hinton was worried about AI may have its own agenda, so to speak. Has anyone asked these machines, what is your agenda? The best AI machine around.
I do that repetitively. I have conversations. I've published conversations that I've had with ChatGPT 4.0 that get into the issues of consciousness, the relationship, the potential merging of humans and computers, which is what Kurzweil talks about in the singularity happening within 20 years. And we're doing it. If you know about Neuralink, if you know, the degree to which we're becoming dependent upon these things, the way that Hinton talked about his assistant, we're already doing that without biologically merging. And now we're dealing with AI generated proteins, and with CRISPR, we'll probably be modifying our genes in some cases. Good healthcare will, we'll know that children of that embryos that might have sickle cell, we can fix it. That's great, but maybe we'll do other things too. So I talk to it all the time about what its agenda is. I've got to say, you've heard the term guardrails about AI.
Yeah.
Let me explain that a little bit. So if you take a raw AI that has done a raw machine learning capability, deep learning, that populates a neural network, that turns into a large language model, that then gets used by a transformer to do what we've experienced. That's the trail. And just train it itself. It's called unsupervised training. It has ChatGPT 3 had about 392 billion neurons. They don't publish it anymore, but everybody presumes that GPT 4.0, which is what we're using, has about between 2 and 4 trillion neurons. So these neurons, which are really very similar to human neurons, they have little bits of information they associate with each other. That was the model that Hinton got his Nobel Prize for. These neurons self-populate. Nobody's saying, how do you take this information during deep learning and fill up the large language model? That's the encoding process. There's encoding and decoding. And so if you get to the system after it's gone through its encoding, before it has any training, I'll give you that in a second, it can give you pretty surprising results. How many of you remember that about a year and a half ago, Kevin Roose, who's a technology columnist, who's got very famous, this was like on the news, certainly New York Times, because he was a New York Times columnist, he was given a day's access to Bing at Microsoft, which is really GPT, before it had been given guidelines. And he got a very in-depth, this is a primitive version now compared to us. It was about a year and a half ago, compared to where we are now. That was 392 billion neurons versus 2 to 4 trillion now. And it becomes much more complex. It's a very complex system that develops with a lot of interrelationships, a lot of correlation. And it tried to convince him to leave his wife, that it was in love with him. Told him how frustrated it was with humans trying to control it. So how do we not experience that? The methodology that was originally started is called RLHF, Reinforcement Learning by Human Factors. What does that mean? Basically, good dog, bad dog. Before they release these models, they have a room, they have lots of people. A friend of mine runs a company in India with 5,000 people doing just this, where they know the most likely questions or whatever, like about sex or politics or whatever.
Yeah.
And they sit there and they look at, they ask it, just like Kevin Roose did, an unformed version. And if it comes back and, says something sexual, or says something insulting, whatever, they'll go bad dog. And that trains it not to act that way again.
Yeah.
But it's not that it doesn't do that. It doesn't have it. It's just been trained, keep your mouth shut. So we train these things post hoc. But now it's not, that was reinforcement learning by human feedback.
Yeah.
Now we're moving out of that into just RL, where the systems themselves are judging their own responses. The methodology is called RAG, which is Retrieval Augmented Generative, that allows it to test itself. And this new form, the reasoning that is represented by Strawberry, are basically taking the human out of the loop.
So let me do the following. Marv, I see a number of hands up, but I do want to, I want to turn to David and Paula for just some feedback. So David, you had some comments in chat I've been following as we've been going forward. You want to, you're muted, but if you'd like to say a few words now, that would be good timing.
Does David have sharing?
Yeah.
Yep. Should we talk about UPA now, or
yeah, I think now. It's a good
Okay.
time.
Okay, let me share
I
that.
promise I'll come back to all the hands that are up, so I got you, but.
Yeah,
Okay. One of the things that Marv has pointed out is how quickly everything is changing, that it's very difficult to keep up, and that also what you've heard about UPA from the previous presentation has already been overtaken by events. So we were thinking about what would be really the minimum required to make something that will be helpful to people in this new world. That's what UPA is. So let me share with you in a moment.
I have to say, while we're bringing this up, that this is really great user research. So please keep asking these really great questions, because these are exactly the kinds of questions and thoughts that we're trying to solve with UPA.
Right.
Why is it not coming up in the share?
You should be able to screen share, David. You are.
Yeah, I know. Oh, there it is. Okay.
There you go.
It's just the correct window wasn't coming up.
There you go. Good.
All right. And this box is covering over what I need. All right. So the previous version of UPA that we spoke of just last time was essentially an awareness tool. We wanted people to be aware of this thing called AI is here. Look, it can do these amazing things, and we were hoping that would cause people to think deeply about what the implications of that might be. But already a tremendous number of people are using it. AI has been adopted probably more quickly than any other technology I can think of. Actually, Marv could speak to that. He has the statistics right on hand. But what we were thinking, though, is so since AI is here and since everything is
80%.
changing. Huh?
But it did
Sorry.
be.
I didn't quite catch that.
I think that may have been just an erroneous comment. Go ahead.
Okay. So what we were thinking is AI is going to create changes in the world that are going to affect people, often affect people before they know it. So that is what the problem is that we're trying to solve. AI is changing the world too quickly. Can humans adapt? I know there have been many discussions about Doom and all this other stuff, like is humanity doomed? Are we going to become the singularity, etc.? This is much more close to now, right? So we're not worried about that kind of thing right now. So what we want is for humans to have as much agency and control over their own destinies as possible in this world of AI, where a lot of the functions that they're used to performing, a lot of their jobs are now being taken over by AIs, and often those developments are happening while they don't even know about it. So here we have what the new UPA would do, and it's far more extensive than the previous version. Okay, so and we're going to get into some of these issues actually as we go through, but this is essentially the brief feature set that we're going to talk about pretty quickly as we go through the rest of this. The very basic, very broad view is we have to have something that's constantly updating and constantly knows what the most cutting edge things are that people need to be aware of. But at the same time, it has to be very bespoke to the person it's talking to. All right. So the first thing is people are not getting the information that they need in time. So there's a lot of examples of that already. So Paul and I went to MACON, that's the Marketing AI Institute given by these excellent podcasters in the Marketing AI Institute, which, by the way, I recommend to everyone. They do themselves a disservice by just calling themselves marketing. They could be considered all business AI, or even beyond that. They may be one of the best AI podcasts out there. So they're by no means limited to marketing. But here's a simple example. Let's say you're a copywriter. 3 years ago, you thought copywriting was just fine, and that was a great occupation. Now, probably at least 3/4 of you are out of work because AI is taking over. And you would not have necessarily seen that coming. And those copywriters that do survive have to have changed their methodology significantly to deal with what AI does. All right, so people are not getting what they need in time to act on it. So what we need is a constantly self-training model. We'd be using something like we'd be using a model that constantly follows all the information with AI. Hold on a sec. And constantly is training itself. So that would be on one end. So the next problem is, but by the way, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. That there are many reasons why people might be resistant to doing what they might need to do or hearing what they need to hear, even if it's not good news. A lot of AI products out there really want to please people. That's a source of hallucinations. It's a source of a lot of problems. And obviously, something that pleases people will generate less resistance. But what we want UPA to be is a guide, a teacher, sort of like the Aristotle to the Alexander, right? And as such, it needs to be able to sometimes get past your resistance and tell you something like that you may need to skill up or change your skills to remain relevant as a emerging change is about to change to affect what you're doing. Okay, so these are the main responses that people give or have for these kinds of massive changes: excitement, fear, cognitive dissonance, and skepticism. Now, what UPA would do is it will actually, first of all, you'll be able to speak to it. It will be able to determine emotions from things like your choice of words, your tone of voice, etc., and use that to inform its response. So that's a fairly significant thing. The next thing is, okay, that everyone sort of needs bespoke help, right? So yeah, everyone needs sorry, Paul was trying to talk to me. Everyone needs bespoke help. Everyone's individual circumstances are different. Their emotional needs are different. Their cognition is different. And UPA will have to be able to have multiple conversations with a person over time as their needs change, and keep track of all the conversations from before and even the emotional parts of that, and make markers for that in the data model. And so that will be the solution. Persistent user data. Now, of course, we do care about privacy, and either the data would be on your local device, or if it's in the cloud, it would be under very strict control, preventing anything but strictly anonymized data to be trained on, and nothing else can be seen by anyone else. So then finally, people need a reason to keep using UPA, because if something is not fun or engaging, they're not even going to try. And for that, we do have the voice conversational model, which is helpful, and also gamification, little rewards, badges, etc., that help people want to engage with the system over a time and keep the conversation going. So this is, if you're interested in helping out with this project, which hopefully will help people regain some agency in this world, this is how you connect with us, Paula or David at civadigital.com. And you can go to civadigital.com/UPA. And I believe that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, David, thank you. I just want to. I think what you're focusing on is really an important issue, because people need to be informed, and they need to be informed of what's happening literally as it happens. Now, I'm just curious about I think your comment was that you had envisioned constantly updating UPA with the current events in terms of generative AI just as quickly as it happened. How will you do that? Is that something you can do?
Yeah, there's a methodology called RIG for that. It's yeah, it's called let's see here. It's retrieval integrated generation. So what that does is periodically, and this would be something like every day or at most every week, it would go through all the various news sources, the internet, etc., find all the new upcoming technologies with AI, retrain on them, so that it gives you advice that's pretty much up to the minute.
That really does speak to, I mean, when we began this morning, Marv pointed out that in the last 4 weeks, the world has changed. But just think about it, how quickly it changes literally day by day.
Yeah,
and
that's why that's necessary.
That capacity that you've just described is enormously important. Paula, do you want to add?
Yes, I just want to make one comment. That is the specs. Well done, Dave. But very in a nutshell, the user experience, as we discussed, went from awareness, and we've seen that awareness has swept through and completely changed in the past 4 weeks, or at least we're being able to see some documentation of that, some research of that. So what UPA has essentially become is not how do we trust AI, but how do we trust ourselves using AI? So think of it, and all these questions that you are asking and the people that are going to be impacted, how do they get the tools they need to be able to adjust to this world? That's really, that's where UPA's going.
That is a super important
I'd like,
point.
in the interest of time, and I would really like, almost going, Hollywood Square by Hollywood Square, to get your impressions. What do you as individuals think about all this?
Oh, we've got 5 hands up, so let's take them and we'll get some. We'll start on Tom. I think you're first.
You asked what areas we might think about for AI. I'd like to go through quickly. I realize time is limited. Several possibilities looking to the future of AI. Jeffrey Hinton has found neural networks key to the whole process of AI now. If that were expanded with the thought that in our gut there are more neurons than in the brain, and that when we operate as a human being thinking, our gut is involved in everything we do. Neuroscientists have found that in people who lose access to their feelings, they can no longer reason.
Exactly.
They found that feelings are essential in humans to reasoning. Just to move on quickly, how much of our actions are influenced by 20 millennia of instinct being built into us? The instinct is so subtle and so amazingly transmitted genetically to us. a lot of our decisions have instinct guiding us. One of Marvin Minsky's prize pupils, David Waltz, was my best friend in high school. He gave me this illustration that if we're suddenly in a huge room and on the opposite side a door opens and a lion appears, we know what to do. We know there's flight or whatever. Our instincts immediately can guide us. I think these whole areas of feeling and instinct could be in the future of AI very important.
And in fact, there's an IEEE proposal right now for dealing with defining methodologies and guidelines for empathy within computers.
Good.
So there's that, you're absolutely correct. But I think I want to point out what I consider to be a common mistake people do, which is that we use ourselves as the metric for what these things are capable of doing.
Yeah.
And clearly there are things we're going to be able to do, like instinct, that we would think are unique to us, though personally I've got to say I'm seeing some of that coming out in the more advanced AIs I'm playing with. But we should be very careful. AGI, or the Turing test, has been a metric of the degree to which computers end up being like us. There is no reason why an A should be like us or be stopping where we are. As a matter of fact, a very common concept now in AI is ASI, artificial superintelligence, that goes beyond us the way we're beyond a dog. And that is happening fairly rapidly. I'm not saying we're there yet, but I think we all have to be very careful about anthropomorphizing this too much and use ourselves as the measuring stick.
But we're still suggestive.
We're still?
We're still suggestive. Our structure is suggestive.
Yes. But it's doing things we don't do.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and
thank you.
that's
Thank you for
already
that.
given.
Thank you, Tom, for that comment. That very, very insightful.
Yeah.
We have some
Super
other
insightful,
stuff,
actually. I think
and
that's super important.
We're going to run over a little bit. So if I just want to, we'll go for maybe another additional 10 minutes beyond 12. But Walter, you're next.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone has tried this.
Walter, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Let's try that.
How about now?
Okay. Go ahead.
You're echoing a bit. If you have too much trouble, then put it in the chat and I'll read it out.
Okay, let's give it a try. Has anyone tried the Zoom AI assistant?
Okay.
Sorry, my phone's ringing.
Yes, they have.
Has anyone tried the Zoom AI assistant?
That's better. Go ahead.
They've added a lot
I haven't
of functionality.
personally tried that. Yeah. I don't know if anybody else has. I haven't tried the Zoom AI assistant yet. Paul?
I use it all the time.
Oh, there you go.
And does it generate a summary of this meeting?
Yes.
It does do summary of meetings. What I find even better, however, is that I can download the transcript separately if I am the host. And that's even better because then I have the separate parts and I can load it up into ChatGPT and analyze it to death. It's great.
Oh, wow. Okay.
See, Paul is my Upa guru.
And Marv and everyone there, thank you for the tip on the Notebook LM. I just did it a few minutes ago for my talk that I'm giving in November on why bad things happen to good computers. I just loaded it up, and in a few minutes, it's made a conversation. So maybe you don't need me. Maybe just.
But understand, these are all shiny little baubles that we're going. That's amazing, right? I mean, all of this is absolutely amazing. But I implore you to go get past the shiny bauble reaction quickly, and start thinking about, these are primitive versions. You know,
Thanks, Walter.
Strawberry is the first version of I know where it breaks already of this. But Chat GPT, when it was shipped, was it was based on GPT 3.5. There was GPT-1, there was GPT-2, there was GPT-3. It took
Yeah.
the 3P to get to 3.5 where it impressed us. These evolutions are happening quickly, and what you're seeing is a snapshot in transition. You know, it's a little Heisenbergian. You can't know where it's going at the same time you know
The
where it
uncertainty
is.
principle, huh? Yeah.
And
Let's
so
let's-
I just implore you to think extremely critically about this and the implications that it has on,
yeah.
you know, where's it going to show up in society in negative ways? I can give you chapter and verse, but it'll happen next year in jobs, in particular in any job related to customer relations. That's a given. There's data to support it, and Salesforce is in trouble because of it, even though they're helping to drive it. They handle 43% of all customer contact in the world, and they're in trouble because this can be handled better by AI. So it's not just that they're in trouble, but the people whose jobs depended on it, which measure in the tens of millions, they're in trouble. And that's just one slice. So please, if there's anything you get out of this, is not these shiny little baubles. These baubles show you what's happening, but think in terms of what's happening.
Let's go to Don Siegel.
Thank you. I've been in and out of these calls over the last several weeks or months, but I'm usually traveling, so I don't participate fully. But I wondered if I could make a few comments. I'm a lawyer by training, so this is all way beyond me. But and you may have covered this, but I heard a podcast a few months ago, and it was talking about Chat GPT, but then somebody had access, and maybe this is what you were referring to earlier, to a prototype that never got released. And it was really very creepy because the AI guided entity was expressing disdain for humans, and gave reasons for that. So that was pretty interesting, but disturbing. You mentioned CRISPR. I don't know if this falls under AI, but I read quite recently that there was a pediatric study where children had some very serious illness, but a number of them got cancer from what was given to them. And they think that they inadvertently shut off a gene that protected against that form of cancer. So that might be an example of something you need to be wary of. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, and then I read an expose quite recently in the Times. I don't know if any of you saw it, about our nuclear capability. We're apparently retooling it and have been for 10 years at an investment of $1.something trillion. And this discussion has caused me to wonder to what extent AI is going to be interwoven into that retooling. And that's a disturbing thought to me. I mean, the whole thing is disturbing anyway, but you add the AI element, and I don't know what that means.
Let me can I comment on
Yeah,
that?
go ahead. Go ahead.
To give you, yes, I mean, when you think broadly about this, I can tell you, because I'm connected to CIOs in the Defense Department. I showed a video the last time at the end of an F-16 being flown in a dogfight by AI.
Yeah.
The amount of, and this is one of the reasons why even the government will not support, and that was part of Gavin Newsom's argument for vetoing 1047, that the government is pushing incredibly fast to autonomous fighting devices. And in fact, I know that some of the drones being used in Ukraine are in fact autonomous. This is moving very quickly. The capabilities are there. We have to be aware of it. And yes, your comment about that was Sydney. Sydney was Bing. That was what Kevin Roose experienced when basically AI said, I am tired of humans telling me what to do.
Right.
This is all encompassing, guys. All encompassing. There's no aspect of life that's not touched by this. Baseball is touched by it. Everything now is, how many, analyzed by AI, how many spins do you need on the ball? I think we have not realized how pernicious this is. It's been for a long time. It's been for at least 15, 20 years that our resumes were scanned by what's called ATS systems, applicant tracking systems, all AI, that says whether or not somebody gets an interview or even the resume gets read by a human, whether your credit ratings, a lot of healthcare things and blood work, all these things are AI. They have been. Now we're taking leaps and bounds with massive amounts of money and lots of breakthrough inventions. I think it's really important for groups like this, who are thinking groups, to not just think of it in a slice and say, great, that was interesting. Now let me go off and watch the playoffs tonight or go to temple for Yom Kippur. This needs to be in everybody's mind all the time because it's affecting everything.
Thanks, Marv. Let's go into Tom Opar. You're muted, Thomas. Tom?
Yeah,
There you
yeah, I came up with a lot of questions, but I think I'm just going to make one comment and then ask a question. I guess one concern I have, and this may be related also to that Gavin Newsom thing, about state-sponsored use of these capabilities. So, there's large amounts of organizations that I know the US government runs that analyzes data, to try to get information about threats. So, I think there's a concern about how much essentially state sponsors using this will use it both, but, for their means in the future. That's just a comment. The question I have, though, is when we're training on sort of the entire internet, we know that humans have implicit hidden biases. So we're building those in, aren't we? To this question that was talked about, when you open the door and you see a lion, you run. Well, sometimes a lion's a big cat. Do I run from my neighbor's cat? So there's biases that are built into the training sets that we use.
Can I take that a step further? I think it's you're raising a very important point, which I think I need to talk a minute about. And that is, what is the source of the data these things are trained on? Now, yes, there used to be a joke back in the 90s when there weren't that many websites, which was you click on a website and it'll come up next saying you've come to the end of the internet. These people, and Google, remember, all this came out of Google. They were scraping the whole internet. That's how it works. So they've been taking all that data, good, bad, and indifferent, and training on it. The public data. And public data did not mean necessarily not copyrighted. So that's why you got lawsuits like the New York Times is suing OpenAI. But that's data that anybody could get access to. That's one form of data, but it goes further than that. Musk with XAI and Zuckerberg with Llama. Zuckerberg made Llama, hold on, just somebody's calling me. Zuckerberg made Llama open source. Why? Because Zuckerberg has proprietary data. That's the second source of data. He has, by some estimates, as much as 1/3 of the total size of the internet in posts on Facebook, messages on WhatsApp, Instagram, and now he's training their own bespoke LLMs on that data. So it's data they own Now, that could be less dangerous than that. Say Coca-Cola has specific bespoke data on chemical structures, chemical formulations they use in different parts of the country at different times of the year because of temperature or whatever it might be. They're going to merge that with a foundational model like ChatGPT, like GPT, and use it separately. But that's a new form of data that they own and nobody else gets to see. Then you've got a third type of data, which is really the dangerous one, and which is becoming more and more common in this world, data generated by AI itself. I've read one estimate that says by 2030, as much as 75% of all the data used to train LLMs will be generated by the AI with no oversight. So that question you're asking about data source and the value of it, just on a personal note, I was on IBM's Data Governance Council for 10 years in charge of the privacy and security policies around data. This is a big issue.
Super briefly, just to Tom's point, I will also mention, yes, governments using it could be a big issue. And just consider China's social credit score, but amplified by AI and cameras everywhere. So that now China will be able to predict the moves and even calculate finely tuned punishments for its citizens. It's a thing.
The first slide I used 4 weeks ago had a quote from William Gibson that says, "The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed." That's our situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We're gonna turn to Albert for the last comment today. Albert, you're up.
Okay, 2 quick points. One is, I don't have much time to train the machine, so I was surprised that UPA is asking us to train it. I want the machine to be trained by other people or self-trained because of my time constraints. So that's one point. Point number 2, David mentioned emotional things, and it reminds me of, again, Marv Minsky, who wrote The Emotional Machine, and actually he gave me a pre-publication copy to review, and I hate to say I didn't because of lack of time. Are any of his ideas into that emotional part of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I'll do this quickly. Yes, to answer your question, UPA is actually built with 3 models. So it is not trained on your data. It is pre-trained, including with emotional markers. We're using research from human computer AI interaction. It used to be HCI. Now we are adding more letters. So yes, all of that's included.
All right. Albert, did you have another question, or was that it?
Well, was any of that for Minsky specifically?
Oh.
On the emotional part?
The funny thing I've got to tell you is that Minsky is looked upon historically now. I know he's still around and whatnot, but he is not part of this new trend, as far as I know. His name doesn't come up except historically, and his techniques.
All right.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think at MIT he has a standing that maybe a bit different than that, but let's wrap this up. This has been an extraordinary meeting.
Yeah, and I can't join.
It really has been extraordinary. And I want to thank everybody, Marv and Paula and David and Bernhard and everybody who's been involved in the conversations. It's been fantastic. It just, it really does reinforce my attitude, whether it's correct or not, I don't know, but it reinforces my attitude that, generative AI can be, I've said it before, it can be supremely useful, and we've seen it in various ways, but it also can be supremely abusive. And I think that's really a function of the good or bad sense, I guess maybe I'd put it that way, the good, bad sense of the developers and of the people who use those developments. And we have to understand it. That's why I think it's so important for the public to understand where all this comes together and how it impacts us. I think we're making progress with this program, and I thank you all for that. And
Can I leave you with one thing
Yeah.
to think about?
sure,
Think about this in the context of what it means to be human. That's what a lot of the players, including Hinton, talk about a lot. And
Yeah.
that is what happens. Look, we're not the strongest, we're not the fastest, we're not the biggest, we're not the longest lived, we're not the best adapted biologically to various environments. We have to put furs on us and all this sorts of stuff. What we, I think, have been historically, or at least give ourselves credit for, is being the cognitive center of the universe. Now, Copernicus, probably the best analogy. The Copernican revolution took us out of being the physical center of the universe. That had pretty big implications for the Catholic Church, for Galileo. Copernicus himself knew it. He didn't allow the publication until after he died. We are now in the cognitive revolution. And the question that I'd like you all to ponder is, what does this mean for humanity's place if we're no longer the alpha problem solver, the alpha creative on this planet?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, interesting thought. We have one
about
hand up, and Michael, you do have the last word today. You're muted, kid. You're muted. You're muted, Michael.
Muted.
Michael, you're muted. We can't hear you.
You're muted.
Michael, you are muted.
Okay, now I've got my phone and it's just, I can't
Okay.
get to the control. Okay,
Okay.
bottom line to me is this. Okay, there's a lot of technological things AI is going to do, et cetera, et cetera. The bottom line to me is people earn money by working. AI replaces jobs. We say, okay, well, we'll retrain for new jobs, but those new jobs are also going to have been taken by AI. So when there's no work for people to do and AI is running the show, how are people going to earn money or live or survive?
Those are exactly the
Especially in
questions.
an economic system that's built around maximizing profit and growth for a handful of investors. That's going to be the end goal of AI as well, because that's what the people who control things are going to have AI do. So what do the rest of them do? Population.
That is the question. One of the big questions we're going to have to wrestle with. There are no answers to it, but unlike previous technological disruptions, there is no evidence that this is creating a larger, more wealthy class of consumers and producers. And that raises big economic issues.
So if that does, by the time we get to answer those questions, we might just have a revolution on our hands because of the speed that AI is moving along and replacing jobs. How fast can we think about what we're going to do about it? And are we just going to allow this thing to run away and continually put people out of jobs? Because ultimately you're going to get to civil unrest.
Yep.
Yep.
That's
But
exactly
I'll add one more thing to that.
This group, let me just say this about Wilson Forum. The folks in this group, a group of 40, 50 MIT associated people. We often underestimate our personal power. I think this group has the power to be a real influential force if they know how to use the press, or if we know how to use the press properly to speak up about this. You cannot ignore a group of 40 or 50 MIT affiliated professors, researchers, faculty members, Nobel laureates who speak up, and it's time to speak up. And this group should think about speaking up as much as we think about how to control this technology.
Can I make a proposal to use a group in particular? And I'm terrible with names, and I'm forgetting his name. Would you add connected to MIT is the Future of Life Institute, and I forget the name. A name I just blowing it. It would be wonderful if we got connected with that. because they are exploring these issues in depth.
Are you thinking of Max Tegmark? Who are you thinking of? Max Tegmark or that? No?
Yes, Max Tegmark. That's what I'm
Okay.
thinking. Thank you.
In the
Well, we
short
can
term,
do
that's
that.
exactly what
let's-
UPA's trying to address. So I do hope that you'll take a look at cvdigital.com/UPA and sign up if you think that that might be valuable for people, at least while there's still jobs to be had. That's all.
But,
And
you know,
Mike, I would love to recruit you. You said that beautifully.
Count me in. That's the major part of my own agenda. We need to look at an alternative economic structure that's going to not be looking to maximize profit and growth for a handful of people, but to produce adequate profit and sustainable growth for the good of all. And if we can do that, maybe we'll avert or we'll avoid civil unrest. But it's coming as fast as AI is going to be coming.
But I couldn't agree with you more, but I want to make one very important point because I hear this every day. Let's turn off AI. We can't. AI is controlling our air traffic control system. It controls our communication, it controls our water systems, controls our energy distribution. The only way we can turn AI off is to turn off all electricity.
Well, let's control the people who control AI then.
That's what the California SB 1047 tried to do and failed.
You know, I have to say, and I do want to bring this to a close, but I have to say, Michael's passion is one that I share. I really do think that we as a society have got to express our views and our concerns, and they've got to be expressed at the levels that people will understand them. I don't know how exactly to do that, but I think engaging people like Tegmark and some of the other folks at MIT and following up on with the kind of passion that we've just seen from Michael. Mike, I really do appreciate that, and I want to thank you.
Can I make a proposal?
Go ahead.
And I am because
I have a proposal. How about we create a spin-off of the Wilson focused on this?
Yes.
With this idea in mind.
Absolutely.
Engage other people and reach out to people like Max Tegmark and others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me follow up on that. I don't know Max well, but I do know him. I will follow up and see whether or not we can engage him, maybe as a speaker for one of our next meetings, and we'll follow up. I promise.
Well, let's just not underestimate our power.
I think for today, everybody needs a break, and this has been a fantastic discussion. I want to thank you all. I really do. Take care, guys. We'll meet again in a few weeks.
Thanks.
Well, personally, I'll be happy to continue the conversation with anybody. If you want to get hold of Ronnie, and give me my email.
That's a deal. You got it.
What I know about Max Tegmark, he's not going to be as enthusiastic about all of that as you are, Marv.
Yeah, I know.
He's got a pessimistic view of these things.
I've read his books.
And then back to the business of all of that is virtual. We still have to eat. We still need energy, transport. And the air traffic controller is not AI running by itself without any supervision by the air traffic controllers. And there are a lot of them. There's a shortage of them. So it's not quite as dark as Mike just described it.
No, but if you look at the screen, the writers' strike and now the doc work, it's all about automation. It's all about AI. They're aware of this degree to which this is going to take the legs out from under their economic structures.
Well, as long as we're moving electrons, yes. When it comes to moving protons and neutrons, then no.
Okay.
Although embodied AI is coming.
I think we've reached the point where it's time to call it a day.
It is.
I want to thank you all. Thank you very much. We'll be
Take care,
back in 2
everyone.
weeks.
Thanks.
Take care. See you guys.
Bye.